I mean, you've been quoted as saying that he was like a acting partner for
He was
life.
my acting partner. He was like my older brother, too. He was a bit older than I, a couple of years. So he was, and he was that way with me, too, a little. You know, he'd take it easy, he'd say to me, calm down. He was there for me. If you're still rolling.
I
Right?
think we are still
Yeah,
rolling.
you're still
Yes.
good. He had a great sense of reality, if that means anything. I don't even know how to say that. It's just that John was there. He was here. He occupied a space, and he was there. He wasn't off this way or that way. He was grounded. And his work would take him off into places. But in life, he seemed to have a real, the person with the head on their shoulders, the go-to person, the person you go to when you need some help.
If I were to hold a photograph up of, which I actually did on West 68th Street, I took a photograph from a still from The Godfather and held it up on the street and asked people who John was. And a lot of people were able to say Fredo, a lot, honestly,
yeah,
but they were not able to say, very few knew his name. Why do you think that is?
See, there it is. That's the thing with John that sort of separates him from the crowd in a way, because John was the actor who became who he was playing. And I've done a lot of work with John, so I know. I did a lot of theater with John, and I watched him become things, you know. And he did it in his. He was a gradation, and he became whoever it was he was playing. And John would be Fredo. You'd believe that's who he was, of course. And I watched him do it with every role. I did Dog Day with him. I did several plays with him, and it was amazing to watch. I mean, it was a lesson in itself. I think I learned more about acting from John than anybody.
Meryl said that too.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me what you?
I'll give you an example. We would do things together. I did this play called The Local Stigmatic with him, which I subsequently did a movie of with someone else actually in the part, because John was gone, had passed. But before that, we did this play, and I remember starting out and thinking, well, I'd say my line to him, and then he'd say a line back to me, but it wouldn't be a line. It would be something else. It was sort of what he was feeling at the time. And then I would say, we got to do this and this and that. And he says, we got to do this and we got to do that. He said, I'd say, yes. He'd say, well, what do we have to do, Al? We have to do this. And then he would just sort of circumvent and go this way and that way. And eventually, he would get us in a place where we were really talking to each other about things that were really there, things that were in us. And it was a process of rehearsal that eventually got us to places that, I can't even call it improvisation. I can call it aligning oneself up to the character, in finding that, and then going with it. And, there was no, you never knew when acting started with John and when it ended. And so consequently, he'd do these characters, and eventually they would become what they were. They didn't start that way. You'd wonder where he was during rehearsals, and he was there, but you would wonder, great, he's not really giving it the old, and then he would just become this. It was an extraordinary thing to watch and to be around, to witness.
There was always an incredible sadness.
Yeah.
He was able to really tap into something true.
Yes.
And quiet.
Yes.
True. But that sadness, I think that's why as a child I was just instantly attracted to that. And I think now as an adult wanting to even do this movie, it's like, but what about it? Where was that from, do you think? Or what was he tapping to be so honest with that?
I know Montgomery Clift was his favorite actor. he emulated him and loved him. And he loved Brando, by the way. It was a big thing. He really loved Marlon. And I think I didn't know much about his personal life, but there was something back there that was deeply affected him. I knew he didn't want to have children, I don't think, or at least what I remember. There was some foreboding thing. I think he saw something in the future. I don't know what it was, but he might have seen what happened to him or felt it. That's how aware of things he was. I think that's how tuned he was. He might have saw that for his future.
How did he react to working with Brando, considering he was
Brando, he just was so, he saw things in Brando that, he just would watch him and tell me, did you see the way he did that, the way he moved this way? As I say, John was a little ahead, so he was seeing things and able to see things and feel things in a way that just a little finer. And I thought, gee, he's ahead. He's ahead.
It's interesting that you said he thought about doing roles throughout his life, and of the only 5 movies that he did, he played Fredo twice.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and certainly I think that in the second Godfather, Coppola and everyone gave him more to do than in the first one. And he's
well, they saw what they had,
He's startling, and the scenes between you have so much dynamics going on. I mean, you feel a deepness that only a family can.
That's right. That's right.
And he was family.
He was family. Yeah.
Can you talk about the process? I mean, especially in The Godfather 2, the way the scenes are shot are so simple in terms of the camera's not moving. It's 2 shot and then 2 close-ups, but it can go on for 7 minutes and you can watch for 20 minutes. There's so much electricity.
What was so interesting with John, now that you mention it, he acclimated. He was very sophisticated, so that he knew that a certain way of working is not going to work here in the movies. So he has that other thing he does. So we hardly talked in The Godfather 2 or Godfather 1, we didn't talk about the scene or anything, because he knew that wasn't needed there. That wasn't going to go anywhere. And it sort of is the trick of movies. But with Sidney Lumet and John and I in that picture, and the way the relationship was, I think we did a lot of talking. But in most, he would just check out the environment. And if it looked like it, so it wasn't kosher to do that, he wouldn't do it.
As a young man, you two starting out as actors, and you end up coincidentally in this play, and the play becomes a success in some way. Yeah. What was he like, and in fact you like, at that moment when you suddenly, I guess, started to see that you might actually make a living as an actor?
Well, I think with John, it was very clear. That's what he did. There wasn't even a question about whether he's going to do something else or how difficult the business is. So John was such, you don't like to say this so much, but you can't help it. But John, he was an artist, and that was what he was going to do, and nothing was going to stop that. Career or business or anything that was beside it didn't matter, really. What mattered was the plank and the passion. The plank being the stage and the passion, and that's what he had. And I remember we were casting Dog Day, and Sidney Lumet wanted a 19-year-old boy. He thought that would be very important, and he was sort of right in a way. When the young boy who goes to this bank and is then shot. And my friend Charlie Lawton said, "What about John?" And the more we thought about it, the more John loomed up. So, of course, Sidney, I would think, well, John, that's not what I'm thinking. John Cazale, no, the guy who did Fredo, no. I don't know if he had done the conversation or not. He had done it already? It was... So, we got John in. And then John and I, and of course, Sidney saw him and saw what he did, And we had this thing we did. We said, look, what would be interesting is these guys don't know each other. And they have really no idea of who they are together. You know, they've never been in any kind of a situation. They saw each other in passing. And they're together in this job. So they're always finding out about each other, everything they do. You know, the discovery, it's always about discovering. So it was a really interesting idea. And one time, there was a scene. We had rehearsed, because Sidney Lumet likes to rehearse, which is good, especially with a play that has a movie that has so much dialogue and so complicated. So anyway, we were doing a scene, and John has to say in the scene, because the guy on television says, there's two homosexuals holding up this bank. And John has a line where he says, I'm not a homosexual. And he was having trouble with that. And John said, I'm not homosexual. He says, what do I mean but when I say that? Why do I say that? Well, Sidney Lumet, being a scholar and a great talent and an intellectual and smarter than anybody I've ever met, he was a whiz kid, Sidney Lumet. Started explaining to him why he says it. Excuse me, my neck. Started explaining to him why he says it. And I knew it was over. I knew we weren't going to work for a while. And I just started pacing in the back, because I work with John. And John says he loved to ask questions, because he taught me about asking questions and not having to answer them. That's the beauty. You ask a question about something, but you don't have to have an answer. What's wonderful about it is you open the door to things. You have the variables now that you've asked the question. And so there was Sidney talking to him and saying, well, you know what I mean? And then finally, he said to John, you say it because it's written, and I'm telling you, as the director, you have to say it. And John said, well, you should have told me that in the first place. I would have. Yes. So we had that perverse streak, too, which we all appreciated. And we got back to doing the scene. And that's, what they call money time, when you're discussing the theory behind things in a movie, on a movie set, while the cameras are rolling, and everybody, the crew is sitting there looking at you. It's but you're not supposed to do that. And you usually go to a camper somewhere to do it. You don't do it. But John wasn't arguing. He just kept asking questions. Sidney would say it's this and it's that, and then John would say, yes. But why would he so and so and so and so? That's what. Then Sidney would get into the entanglement, and it got to the point where Sidney, who was an extremely patient man, let me tell you, he blew it. He just said, "No way, you're doing it because I say it," and then John says it in the movie. It's fine.
How did he take? I mean, Godfather obviously became an international sensation.
Yeah.
As did Part 2 and won Best Picture and all this stuff. How did he take that change in his life, however it was, just being part of something so monumentally in popular culture?
Well, I don't know with John. John sometimes kept things in, and because I can't imagine how he wouldn't have been somewhat shook up by not getting an Oscar nomination, that second one. I was sort of shocked by it. I didn't say anything. But I thought, well, I can understand why people don't get nominated in movies that are obscure, and they're great, but they're not movies that are... But here, a movie so front and center, so out there, so there, you would think he'd have gotten more recognition for that part in his time, but he didn't. And I don't know how he felt about that. Merrill, I think, might know more about how he felt. I don't know. I always felt that must have affected him somewhat.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. And then Dog Day, You see him in Dog Day, nothing again. You know, it was when you do two roles that's significant, in pictures that are significant, you know, you would expect a little bit more attention. That's all. But I don't know. I would think he cared about that a little bit. Anybody would. It would be sort of superhuman to think that he wouldn't. I'm thinking that John probably would have been interested in a national theater. I think that's the direction he'd have gone, because he got so much from the delving into things and the material. And I mean, you know, they say, well, actors get a thing, they do it. John grew in a role and grew and became it more and more, and it never stopped. It was endless. And that's what he taught me too, that it just never over. You just keep going, you know. I mean, I did American Buffalo once, 25 years ago. And I remember then, after a year still rehearsing, and I got that from John. And that, you know, because things keep happening. Things, and it all, the texture, it all becomes, and it's the opportunity in live theater and regular movie thing. You just get it and go. You go with whatever you get because it's over, because it's printed and that's it. But with a play, you see, John knew about the idea that the great stage actors of the past had repertoires which they did their entire life. So they had 3 or 4 plays, parts, not many parts, just maybe 2 or 3 parts that they were glorious in, maybe even 1. And they repeated this throughout their lives, so that by the time, if they started at 25, by the time they were 50, can you imagine them doing those roles? I mean, it was different. It wasn't acting anymore. It was something else they were doing. So close to opera singers, I guess. I think that's what fascinated John. It thrilled him, and he got a lot out of that. And I think that's the direction his life might have gone.
Are there moments when John comes back to you?
There should be. I'm gonna tell you, after this documentary, I'm gonna start thinking about John more, because he does inspire. So I mean, you know, I've been thinking about him enough, and that's what happens. You know, I used to dream about John a lot, of course, when it first happened, and he was always alive in a dream. And see, it's always there, you know, for 30 years. I was doing a play called The Basic Training of Pablo Hummel on Broadway. And it was a really great role, and I had done things with it, and I had gotten the Tony Award, and I was really, you know, but John was coming to see it. And I don't like to know when anyone's in the house, but I knew John was in the house, right? And every single thing I did, every scene I did, I was trying to impress John. And I knew I'm doing this. I'm saying, I'm not doing this. I'm trying to impress John. You know? And it was over, and I was really unhappy because I knew I hadn't done. And John came back, and he said, "It's very impressive, Al." Very impressive. I thought, yes, John. I said, you know what? I said, he was so graceful, though. He was so gracious about it all. But I said, you know, I knew you were there, and I was doing everything twice as much as I had to do it, you know. He says, it was good, Al. It was good. It was good. He says, you don't know. You don't realize that, you know, you've been doing it. But I knew I had. So I was very, you know, he was like one of my idols, so that when he was coming to see me, it was, you give all out. And that's the worst thing you can do, is try to impress your friends who you love.